Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side.
Judge Mark Wolf criticized Trump for doing what judges like Wolf himself gave Trump the power to do, and now blames someone else after their utopian ideas didn't result in utopia. Judge Mark Wolf recently criticized President Trump as prosecuting the innocent for political reasons. Smug lawyers everywhere reposted what Wolf said, like this never happened before, and it's the end of the world. I know this idea that courts were honorable before Trump came along is a complete scam. My friend got life without parole in 2016 for a crime that didn't even happen, where every witness lied and every category of evidence was faked. Just this week, a judge wrote a nonsensical opinion in her case that contradicts fact, after I was treated to her own lawyers lying about her in court contrary to things I witnessed. Stuff like that happens every day, and Wolf never had a word to say about it. The very fact that federal courts let prosecutors use jailhouse confession witnesses proves federal courts have been a scam all along. You can't have a world where prosecutors let dangerous felons out of prison as a reward for lying and hide this from juries as a standard process, and then pretend courts were honorable before Trump. Courts are supposed to stop prosecutors harming the innocent, not prosecutors themselves or the political process. It's judges like Wolf himself who are supposed to stop prosecutors harming the innocent, not resigning as judge so he can do it through political speech. The very idea that Wolf thinks he needs to quit his job as judge and instead participate in politics to stop the innocent being harmed is the world he created. Why does Wolf think we have jury trials, except that politicians will harm the innocent for their own agenda? Federal courts' actions reveal they really don't know why we have jury trials, and act to undermine them and move power to the vain executive branch, and now try to regulate the executive branch outside court. Wolf and judges like Scalia are the ones who think the executive branch should be able to do what they want under regulation by politics, not by facts and law in court, which will always be under influence of local expedients and personal agendas, rather than measuring fact against law. Wolf and his generation of communist academic judges are the ones who created the world where what Trump does is possible. Wolf complains about the prosecution of two of Trump's perceived enemies, James Comey and Letitia James. There hasn't been a trial in either of these cases. The grand jury proceedings have been secret. Wolf's own actions imply a belief that case outcomes can be decided in the town square based on gossip, without needing court proceedings to bring out fact. Wolf devalues the role of courts by suggesting he socially knows the facts in these cases and what the outcomes should be. From some second vantage point with free, perfect information that can then supervise politicians. Maybe Wolf knows all the facts in these two particular high-profile cases. But the idea that government is going to be regulated against harming the innocent by people socially knowing the facts of every case and then disapproving the actions of prosecutors is as economically wrong as imagining factory managers in the USSR would be centrally supervised to make choices based on local costs and preferences. In other words, suppose Trump's prosecutors decided to prosecute 10,000 innocent black people whom nobody ever heard of, using lies. Neither Wolf nor the person the next cubicle over in the prosecutor's office would have any idea. But that's what Wolf approves of. Wolf approves of not courts based on facts stopping the executive branch harming people, but basically political speech and a social process deciding who is harmed. Moving the decision from courts to extant factors, like Scalia in Hudson v. Michigan. That's the mirage of communism. The idea that sort of a kibbutz can have like a parley in the town square and decide everything from what food McDonald's managers should make to whom the executive branch should harm. If Trump is harming the innocent, then courts need to fix their process. Not elect a more altruistic and all-knowing president. Not decide whom to harm based on some godlike wisdom and honor in the executive branch. Wolf's vanity of the executive branch, without needing checks and balances. Wolf is showing us his belief that guilt should be determined in the executive branch under political regulation. The same way factory managers in the USSR made their production decisions based on honor and altruism, immune to information and cost. Judges and juries, not social dynamics, is what is supposed to protect the innocent. But Wolf himself is the one who abandoned the jury trial to arbitrary executive power. Based on a misguided communist theory that politics can produce and process information without needing the middleman of courts and law, whether in commerce or criminal justice. It was Wolf's fellow judges that recently removed the ability of actors independent from the chain of mob rule to introduce local information and prosecute government corruption and misconduct in court. Voters voted for legislators. Legislators created independent departments and actors with standing to check corrupt government agendas and lawless political currents. The Supreme Court then dissolved them under some communist free information theory of the unitary executive, imagining voters can see and supervise everything. Voters voted for legislators. Legislators passed the 14th Amendment and 42 U.S.C. 1983. Courts then created absolute immunity to let sociopaths torture innocent incompetents with perjury for sport and political theater. If Wolf himself didn't share the same bad economic theories, he could persuade his fellow judges, rather than participate in the misguided process he created, where courts defer to politics. Political expedience is always expected to assault the rule of law, and courts are supposed to enforce it. Not abdicate and try to enforce the law by swaying the majority through political speech. The public doesn't prosecute crime. Independent local actors, which the Supreme Court dislikes, do. Voters will never stop politicians breaking the law. They can't even know what the facts are. The Supreme Court, not anybody watching CNN, ensures equal justice. They, like Wolf, abdicated to politics. Wolf now imagines to gain from trying his case before the public mob, and then blame Trump as the force making democracies fragile. Wolf needs to look in the mirror. The problem is his own peers. The rule of law is not created by influence on politicians from speech in the town square. It's literally impossible for the collective perceptions of majorities to create equal justice, to enforce rather than work against the rule of law. Wolf's words reveal that he is the one who thinks guilt should be determined in the executive branch, under regulation by politics. Now Judge Wolf is participating in that political process he created for deciding guilt, and not liking the results. Without realizing the results of the process he created are always terrible.